Hi guys, it's Jacob aka Jake the Loser, and I'm back again with another video. Before I start, make sure to like, subscribe and comment if you have any future video ideas, or if you want to get any discussions going. I'll definitely be actively looking into the comment section. As you can tell by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite weight loss drug, Ozempic.
Ozempic, we know you didn't do that alone.
Now, before we discuss weight loss on Ozempic and the pros and cons, and I guess just my overall thoughts on Ozempic, it's probably best that we actually discuss what the hell Ozempic is in the first place. Semaglutide, sold under the brand name Ozempic, it's a GLP-01 receptor agonist used primarily for the treatment of type 2 diabetes by decreasing blood sugar levels and increasing insulin production and release. So one of the issues, especially in Australia, was that everybody was buying Ozempic specifically for weight loss. And with that, it was causing shortages in actually getting the drug. And I think this had a massive impact on people that were actually using Ozempic for type 2 diabetes. So as a result, Wegovy was introduced, and it's another brand of semaglutide. It does the exact same thing as Ozempic, but this time it was actually marketed towards weight loss. Now, I will say neither of these drugs are cheap whatsoever. Ozempic is a little bit cheaper than Wegovy, but you know, for the average person, you would probably have to budget to consider both of these drugs as an option. I think Ozempic is a lot cheaper on PBS, which is the Australia's Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, and that's specifically only for people that are using it for type 2. As far as I know, people that are using it for weight loss, they get recommended Wegovy, and that is definitely not subsidized whatsoever. At the time of recording this video, Wegovy is not even on the PBS, and the prices definitely differ between the two. So the Ozempic price for diabetes on PBS is $31.60, but for private script, aka for weight loss purposes, is actually $140. Now, the Wegovy price differs depending on the dose that you get. So for the 0.25, the 0.75, and the 1 milligram dose, it's $260. For the 1.7 milligram dose, it's $380. And for the 2.4 milligram dose, it's $460. So yes, it's very expensive. I will say for the average person, including myself, it is an investment, but personally I would say it was worth it, especially as a way to lose extra kilos before my surgery. So I started actually taking Ozempic in around April of May last year, so that was 2024, and the first few weeks were rough, I will say that. So the way that it worked for me is that I was given a pen. It was 3 milliliters and the dose was 1.34 milligrams per milliliter, and I had to kind of work my way up to the full dose. So the first dose I was taking was 0.25, and basically I had to kind of calculate that myself based on the clicks of the pen. I believe it was maybe 12 or 15 clicks of the pen first, and then after 4 weeks on the 0.25 milligram dose, I worked up to 0.5, and then after another 4 weeks I then worked up to the 1 milligram dose, which was the full dose for the Ozempic. Now, I will never forget, I guess a day or two after my very first dose, and mind you, this was only 0.25, it was rough. I felt so sick. I started to feel lightheaded and tired all the time, and honestly I just didn't want to eat. You know, the sight of food, the smell of food, it just made me feel even more sick, to be honest. I will say drinking water was enough to fill me up. I've always been a pretty heavy water drinker anyway, and you know, I usually drink a liter of water at a time, and it definitely filled me up, and after that I really had no desire to eat whatsoever. I have to force myself to eat, obviously, you know, to be able to function and live as a human being, but every meal that I ate, you know, I probably only get halfway through and I had to stop, otherwise I'd just feel sick. So as it would get to the end of the first week, you know, I started to feel a little bit better. The nausea and the headaches, you know, they weren't as bad, and you know, my appetite started to come back a little bit. However, after I had my next dose, the cycle just continued. Went back to feeling sick, you know, went back to getting the headaches, and it just wasn't a fun time. So fast forward 4 weeks, I then started my 0.5 5 milligram dose, and I'd say the side effects got a lot worse. So after the first 4 weeks, I obviously worked up to the 0.5 milligram dose, and I will say my symptoms got so much worse. I still had the general fatigue and the nausea and the headaches, but you know, the nausea in particular got a lot worse. If I drank a little bit too much water in one sitting, or if I brushed my teeth a little bit too hard, I'd throw up, you know, TMI, but I would. And, you know, this would happen almost every single day, especially midweek, where I felt like the dose worked the most. You know, my appetite was pretty much non-existent at this point as well. So anything that I did eat, you know, I would just feel bloated and full, and yeah, it would end up coming right back up again anyway. So on the plus side, I did start noticing the weight loss. I think when it comes to first taking Ozempic, they do say weight loss is sort of gradual, and you know, you lose half kilo here and, you know, half kilo there. However, I will say that I did lose quite a lot of weight within the first few weeks. I think by the first 4 weeks, I'd lost about 2 kilos, and by my 8th week, I'd definitely been down 5 kilos. And I think it's pretty significant considering I wasn't even up to the 1 milligram dose yet. So let's talk about the full dose, shall we, and have my time on that. But you think things got a lot worse? I'm gonna tell you it didn't. You know, I'd say that the nausea was still bad, but the headaches pretty much went away. I guess it was just my body getting used to the drug at that point. You know, if I still drank a little bit too much water, it definitely wouldn't sit right with me, and, you know, it would be more susceptible to throwing it back up. But for the most part, you know, I was able to still function, and, you know, live a normal day-to-day life instead of, you know, constantly feeling tired and sick all the time. And at that point, I also kind of got used to eating smaller portions, you know, definitely knowing what size meal would make me feel sick. So it was a good way with forming a new relationship with food. So I finished my second pen, which is where I was at the 1 milligram dose. And I was able to get a third pen after that. However, this would be my last dose of Ozempic for a while. Ozempic was completely sold out. I went to so many different chemists. Nobody had any stock. Nobody knew when they were going to get stock, and it was a really hard time. I will say I was pretty down about it. You know, I took this drug. I've pretty much, you know, went through all the side effects and everything, and, you know, I saw significant weight loss with it, and now I was worried that, you know, I can't get it, and all the weight's just going to come right back on. I'll be back to where I started. So during the next few months, I really did try to make sure that I didn't unravel all the hard work that I did. You know, I made sure to still keep up with my exercise, still be mindful of what I eat, you know, but, you know, for the most part, I pretty much kept all the weight off. I gained a little bit, you know, but, you know, it wasn't too bad. Around this time, I actually started seeing a specialist, and he had told me that Wegovy is a thing now. You know, it's exactly the same thing as Ozempic, but it's actually geared towards weight loss. So I did a lot of research, you know, realized very quickly that the price would be a lot more, but for the first few months at least, you know, it was sort of manageable. So I ended up buying my first Wegovy pen, and yeah, $280. It was an investment. But I will say, you know, my experience on Wegovy was completely different to my experience on Ozempic. You know, yeah, I started to get a little bit of fatigue here and there, but my side effects were nowhere near as bad as what they were when I first started Ozempic. And the thing is, the dose was a lot higher as well. So instead of starting out at the 0.25, I started out at the 0.5, then I worked up to 0.75, and then worked up to the 1 milligram. And yeah, I will say that, you know, I didn't have any negative side effects. The main side effect that I had was that I was full all the time, and with that I was more than happy. You know, I was more than happy to take that. You know, if that's what the new price was going to get me, I definitely took it. I was happy about it. So I was on Wegovy for a good 2-3 months, and overall I lost 17 kilos, and I was completely happy about that. I'm pretty much down to my former heaviest, and was wonderful. I made the executive decision to not increase my dose beyond the 1 milligram. I think for me personally, that 1 milligram mark was pretty perfect for me. I feared that if it was to go up, I'd probably start getting sick again. Not to mention that it was a lot more expensive than what the 1 milligram was. So I ended up going back to my GP, had a chat with him, and he pretty much was like, hey, if it's working for you, don't fix what isn't broke. Essentially, he was happy with me, maintaining on the 1 milligram, especially because at this time it was around March, so a couple of months ago, and I knew that I would have to actually stop using Ozempic a month before my surgery, which is in June. So at that point I just thought, let's just see what I can lose before surgery time. So that's pretty much my experience on Ozempic. I think if Ozempic is used correctly, it's great for helping people lose weight. In my opinion, the pros and cons are pretty balanced, and I think it is something you need to, read about. And I guess the, side effects or, the experience is different for everybody. So definitely be mindful of that. I think, the ability and the ease to lose weight is 100% a pro. It works and it's proven to work. It isn't like any of the fad diet shakes or tablets that tell you, oh, if you take this 3 times a day, you're going to feel full and you're not going to want to eat. No, that's all BS. This actually does work. And I guess an injection a week, for some people, it is pretty doable. I mean, for me, on injections, I'm fine with those. And I think, people that already have maybe diabetes and they are taking insulin, they would be, used to taking, needles every day. So at least this is only 1 needle a week, and the needle's tiny, you definitely don't feel it. I think the pros are pretty strong. However, I think the main con for sure is the price. It is ridiculously expensive. It isn't covered on PBS. I'm not sure about the States or in the UK, but here in particular, it's not covered under any scheme or anything, so you do have to pay full price for it. I know I was able to get some money back based on my private health insurance, but that is capped at a certain amount every year, and after the 3rd dose, I will say that I did max out my allowance for pharmacy under my private health, so didn't help after that. And I think the other big con is probably the side effects. I mean, feeling nauseous and feeling full, I guess that comes with the territory. That's the whole point of the drug, but for some people, I guess it might be a little bit too extreme, especially if you do live a busy lifestyle and you can't really put up with the fatigue and the the headaches and everything. I think for me, because I do work in an office and for the most part I work from home, I'm pretty good with that. I was able to get around it, but for people that do have to be on the ball and everything, it might be a little bit too much for them. I think the main issue that I have found with Ozempic is that unless you are changing your mindset about food, you're not really going to make any progress. To be honest, you will lose the weight for sure, but as soon as you stop using Ozempic, you will put the weight back on if you aren't maintaining a healthier lifestyle. And I know that's what everybody says, but it is true. I have seen a lot of talk with people shaming those for using Ozempic as a cheat code. And I guess I have some mixed feelings about that. I think for sure some people do use it just to lose a few kilos, and they probably could just go through diet and exercise. But I think with that mindset, we sort of bordering, the territory of body shaming. I don't think it's fair to gatekeep Ozempic and be like, hey, you're not fat enough to use it, or, you're skinny, you should just try and lose a few pounds the natural way, you don't need Ozempic. I think the same argument could be said about people that are overweight. And again, it's not fair to say that, because not everybody can lose weight the natural way. They do need help. I don't think it's fair to police people and say, if you aren't that overweight, you shouldn't be using it to lose weight. But at the same time, I do see the argument that people may not necessarily be morbidly obese, but are running to get Ozempic. It does kind of take stock out of the hands of people that genuinely need it. Would I say that I was in the category of somebody that genuinely needed Ozempic, especially knowing I was going through weight loss surgery myself? I would say yes. At the end of the day, my weight, whilst I'm not, super morbidly obese, I am considered obese, for my size and my height, and I am aware that some of the health conditions that I have, they might not have been caused by being overweight, but being overweight has for sure made them worse. So I think, it's definitely, whilst I might not be in the category of people that should be using Ozempic, I think, Ozempic has helped me, become fitter and become, lose some weight before I do undergo weight loss surgery. And, it was recommended by my specialist, it was recommended by my surgeon as well. So I'm not going to feel bad about using it, and I don't think you should feel bad about using it. I think what I want to give as a takeaway about this video is don't feel ashamed if you are overweight and you are either using Ozempic or you're considering using Ozempic. I think if you're prepared to deal with the side effects and you're financially able to buy it, go for it. So long as you do implement it with a healthier lifestyle, you are exercising, you are using the right, eating the right foods and everything, I don't think there's any harm in using it to help you lose weight. But yeah, anyway, that is enough from me about Ozempic. If you are interested in following my weight loss journey, please like and subscribe. And if you also have any questions or if you want to recommend any future videos, please leave a comment. I am currently, from the day filming this video, I'm about 2 months away from getting my surgery. So I'm going to start trying to put out a few more videos. I have a story time that I plan to film soon, and also, some vlogs and some pre-surgery preparation that I have to go through, which you guys will see shortly, and also I might actually vlog my current workout regime and what I do now. So if you're interested, stick with me, stay tuned, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Catch ya.